Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. I promised the Florida Gator fans that we keep you guys as updated as possible with what Billy Napier is doing on the recruiting trail. We're going to go back to the 2026 class where Florida lands a commitment from a very traitsy cornerback and four-star cornerback Jaylen Waters from the state of Florida. And this is a guy that I'm pretty familiar with as he committed to Florida State earlier this spring, backs off his commitment, winds up committing to the Florida Gators. And I'll say the same thing that I said when he committed to Florida State, and that is these are the type of cornerbacks that you want to bet on, making that transition from the high school ranks to the SEC level from a pure physical trait standpoint. Jaylen Waters is a box checker at 6'2", 170. Yes, needs to put on some weight to that frame. Again, he's only a sophomore in high school going into his junior year, but what stands out to me about Jaylen Waters is just how long this cat is. I mean, he's a guy that can play press man coverage, put his hands on opposing wide receivers, and on top of the length, really impressive footwork and fluidity in the hips. He's a guy that can mirror wide receivers consistently, stays in the hip pocket. I think this is a really nice commitment, and you got to give Will Harris a lot of credit. I am a big fan of what Will Harris is doing on the recruiting trail. Thought that was a phenomenal hire by Billy Napier. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Florida Gator fans. The amount of support, it always means a ton. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We know it's going to be a very busy month of June and July for this program on the recruiting trail. And without further ado, let's get into Jaylen Waters. And let's first talk about, yes, 2026 class. Right? There's a long way to go to get this one over the finish line. But what I think should make Florida Gator fans relatively optimistic about this one sticking is he was already committed to Florida State. And so you would kind of think that if he backs off his first commitment, you normally think he's going to probably take his time and make sure he gets that second commitment right. And Florida Gators, that's the choice that he makes. And you look at this kid, you dive into the film and say, this one, from a physical trait standpoint, looks like an SEC caliber cornerback. Getting into the film, again, I think what stands out to me first is how smooth he is. You see this first rep, not necessarily playing press man here, but you kind of get the sense that for that length and that frame, I mean, very kind of in phase with wide receivers, consistently in hip pockets. That's something that you really look for when you're talking about some of these longer wide receivers. And you kind of continue to work through the film and say, I mean, this is a guy that consistently is sticky with wide receivers. The throwing windows are often very tight for a guy like Jaylen Waters. And then you start working through, I mean, what he can do as a press man cornerback. This is probably what I like the most. I mean, you look at Austin Armstrong and all the things that he wants to do in the back end of the defense, walking up safeties. You take a look here. We're not playing with the single high safety. We are putting Jaylen Waters out on an island. He gets hands on wide receivers. He gets his hand around play. I think they call pass interference on this rep, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, this is how you want to do it, right? Getting your head back around to the football, making a play on it. You just see the length that this kid has in his arms. That's really intriguing. Again, some more reps of that press man. I love how he uses that length. I mean, consistently putting his hands on opposing wide receivers, really only allowing them to go as fast as he's going to allow them to run. He wants to be physical. I think as his frame continues to develop, I think that's when you see that press man ability kind of even get a little bit more improved. But again, a guy that you can put in press man, leave on an island, let him kind of just be really sticky with wide receivers. I think this is a really intriguing one. I think this is a really nice rep too, where he shows a little closing speed. And this is, again, something that's rare for these 6'2" longer cornerbacks. Balls in the air, hey, we got to break down the football, go make a play for no gain. Jaylen Waters can be a guy that does that as well. Big fan of this commitment. And you take a look at what Florida has in the 2026 class. It's never too early to start building recruiting classes up. The Florida Gator fans certainly know that more than anybody. You got your quarterback locked up in 2026, in four-star quarterback Will Griffin, who we talked about, we're really big fans of. Now you go out and get a guy in Jaylen Waters, who, again, top 200 national prospect, a guy that in my mind has an extremely high ceiling at that cornerback spot. We start talking about the young talent that Florida has in that secondary room. if Will Harris can start getting the best out of these cats, I like this Florida Gator secondary. I like where they are going. And another big commitment for Billy Napier on the recruiting trail. Again, we got any more commitments on the weekend, we'll certainly be keeping you guys updated. If y'all do enjoy the content, again, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.